Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to look at how you can manage remote guests on air using 6 potential remote guests and working with them to assign them to up to 3 on screen shots at a time. So, we're going to dive into that in a second. But before we do, I welcome everybody. If you have any questions, any comments, please just post them and we'll get to them live during the show. Also, if you'd like to join us here live on the show, we have a link that you can click on and somebody from the studio will get you on with us. All right. So let me start by actually showing you what it is that we're going to be doing here. So I have this set up here where at the top, you see a potential output screen. So that could be like me as a host there talking with people, and I have 3 guests. And I have a multi-view panel below that. And what that multi-view panel will let me do is take and assign guests to these. I have 6 full total guests. So I can assign these guests to a preview. And when I'm happy that I have the right guest assigned, then I can go and take them live. And if you want to see this in action, I can just take and start to do any sort of assignments at the top. And when I'm ready, I can take them all in one clip. Or I could go in and say, I actually want to bring in somebody different for my middle box shot. Let's maybe somebody that's not up there already. Here. And I want to go and do this. And so I can just take that one person and swap them in. So this is basically a control interface for managing these guests into on-air sessions. And I also in this have the ability to go and say, I actually only want to do this in a 2-box, or I just want to do this in a 1-box, so a host and a guest talking. So I have all of this set up as a way to manage these guests as they come in. And I'm doing this through a Stream Deck. So for each one of the guest inputs, I can say for the first slot on the screen, I have 6 potential guests I can assign. And then I have a take button, and I do that for the second slot and the third slot down here. I have a take all button all the way at the end. And I have the 3 different multi-boxes I had, 1-box, 2-box, and 3-box shots. So that's how we have everything set up for this vMix session. And this is something that you will definitely deal with if you're doing virtual events or other types of webinars, things where you have multiple remote people, but you just don't want sort of a 6-box shot with a host all the time on screen. This will let you manage those types of situations. So before I get into sort of the next step of how we set this up, we have some comments here. So let's dive in and take a look. So you demand, thank you. I appreciate you joining us here, you. So, Michael, always good to see you here, Michael. Thanks. William, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed the show. I really do. So Wolfgang, hello, how are you? Great to have you here. Okay, so what I want to do next is I want to go into the vMix session we have, and I'll sort of go through how we broke this down to make this work for us. So in the input set, which is probably, going to describe a lot of what we have here, I can break this down where I have a set of assets. So in this case, I sort of have the host, and that would be like a host camera or something like that. I have my 6 remote guests that are sort of sitting here, inputs 4 through 9. I also have this open seat and an open seat label. And the reason I added this, and we can sort of dig into how I work with this in the session itself, but one of the challenges for a lot of people inside of virtual events is creating that engagement with your viewers. So if you had something where you could open a seat up and let the audience decide which one of the panelists you wanted to have in there to join the discussion, or if you wanted to let your audience members connect and become part of your discussion where they could join your panel and go and start talking. Those types of things would allow for more engagement. So I just wanted to add that because I thought that would be an interesting and useful spin in a virtual event or webinar type setting. So I have that. Then we have just basic media assets, things like this is a background that we use for our multi-box. This is the logo for the top for our production. And then I have a series of mix inputs. And I have the mix inputs I have set up here are mixes, mix 2, 3, and 4, which are for our on-air live guest, and mixes 5, 6, and 7, which are for the guests that are in preview. So a good question to ask would be, why am I using mixes for this? And the reason we wanted to do it this way is that if you had video feeds coming in at different aspect ratios, so say, for instance, somebody was coming in on a phone that was in portrait mode instead of landscape, or somebody coming in at like, you know, DCI 4K, which is 4096, you know, by 10 by 2140, 2180. So this would give you these types of advantages where you could sit there and go, now I don't have that odd size on screen, but I can actually take and make sure that these all come out as 16 by 9. And when I crop them, they crop the same way. And when I have borders around them, they border the same way. So having this set up gives me that type of control over the signal. And that can be very, very useful. It also means that you can do things that may be specific to each one of these layers, where you can put overlays on top of them and other things, because now you can sort of stack this up and create more complex compositions for each one of these guests. So it gives you a good starting point for that as well. So let's see, what do we have here now? So how do we set this up? We end up with our multi-view here at the end, and our multi-view is effectively giving us a list of all of the guest slots that we have for in preview, all the guest assignments in preview. And then we also have the guests that are actually out. So if we sort of look at this here, these are all the guests that are assigned in preview, and these are all the guests that are actually live. So if I just came here and sort of will just do this and take that, you can see now, once I do the take, all the guests in preview and all the guests in live match. And that's important because anytime to be like workflow smart, anytime I press a take button, it should definitively say, whatever I am seeing in my preview is what's going to come out on program. So we always make sure, and we'll go through this as we sort of talk through how we did the scripting for this, we always make sure that if I press a take button, either in a single channel or a take all, we end up with the exact, whatever you see in preview going into our live guest. So there's no confusion ever on that. Okay, so the end of this, let's sort of slide down here, is our multi-box shots, where I have a 1-box, 2-box, and 3-box. These are pretty straightforward, but let me start and just go through how this 3-box is layered together. So let's sort of jump into the layers here. And this is sort of the start of how we have these mechanics working. So we have our background, which is what you see here, our multi-box background. And we have our logo for whatever this production panel is. Then I have the host, and the host is positioned off to the side. And then I have my 3, basically, what would effectively be my 3 mixes that are coming out here, which is the 7, 8, and 9. And behind those, and sort of underneath, I have 3 open seats. And this means that if there is no guest assigned to one of those, remote guest assigned to one of those channels, what you'll see is the open seat beneath it. And so we set this up so as we stack these, open seat 4 is sitting behind whoever is in mix 2. Open seat 3, the 5 is sitting behind mix 3, and 6 is sitting behind mix 4. So we have this, we're basically, there's a guest and a seat, and they're combined, and when you take the guest away, that seat becomes visible. And that's sort of the predicate for how we do all of our scripting, where we have these layers, and we are manipulating in the mixes what shows up in the layers that we have here. And it effectively works the same way if I am looking at my multi-view. I have my previews, I have my programs, and then I have my open seats. So if there's an open seat sort of sitting there in my preview program, it's covered. You sort of know there's going to be that seat there, and you'll see that clearly. So this is basically the structure. And what we're going to be doing in our scripting is manipulating the mixes to do what we need them to do all these assignments. So let me, before we get into the scripting piece, which will be next, let's see if we have anybody else that's come in. William, good to see you. Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate it. Automation, always good to see you. Thank you. Okay, so let's go into the scripting. So for scripting here, and this is important, we've done a lot of complex scripting in the past for dealing with having a different guest here in different slots and managing them and managing green rooms. But for this show, I wanted to do something which only worked with the most basic shortcut style scripts. And so we have really 4 types of scripts throughout everything we're doing here. There is a script that will allow me to assign a guest, that will let me create the open seat for any one of the slots. And we have that. Then we have the ability to assign a remote guest to a slot, the ability to take an individual slot, and the ability to take all the slots together. So this is basically sort of the whole predicate structure for, we may have 6 different guests and we may have, 3 different slots, but they all use the same basic logic. So let's start by looking at how we set up for an open seat and what we would do for this. So what we are doing is we have all our mixes set up. And if you remember, we said we have, mix, the mixes 1, 2, and 3, which, in vMix are mix 2, mix 3, mix 4, because they zero base everything. So mix 1 is our first slot that's open live. So if I want to clear a seat out, what I'm doing up front is I'm saying assign the to my preview input. So I'm not putting it live. I'm just assigning it now to say, if I take on this, this is what you'll see. So I set the preview input to my open seat text. And so the text is the layer which says open seat on top of it. You could change that to whatever you want, but the image of the seat is baked into the layering on the live. So you don't need to put an image, but this just says, what text am I going to put over that image? And if the text is there, it has a transparent background, so you see the seat and the guest goes away. Because I'm setting this up as preview, in my mix windows for the preview, which would be 4, 5, and 6, for mix 4, 5, and 6, for that first one here, I'm saying, now cut in the open seat. But because I don't have that set up in the preview, I just say, put an open seat image there, because that's not important. That's just reference. So whoever is controlling this knows there's an open seat that's going to be switched to. And then, and this is, I mentioned before, I always have to make sure that whenever I hit a take button, it reflects exactly what you see in preview. What I'm doing here is saying, since I'm just assigning this to preview, I need to remember what it is. So I'm using the set dynamic inputs to remember what input I've assigned to that preview, so that when I do the take and whatever is in preview goes over to live, I can then go back and change preview to make sure it matches what's live. So you're not like switching to something and it's like now when I did that transition, I have something else sitting in preview. This clears out preview and says preview now matches what's live in program. And that's why we do this. Because if, and I'll give you an example later, but there could be situations where if I didn't do this, you would get out of sync with what you see on between preview and what would go live. So this is basically what we've done. These are the same for the guest. In this case, instead of doing the open seat, I'm just doing which remote I have, but everything else is really identical. So the template is the same. And I'm just manipulating these mixes. And then when I actually want to take something, what I'm doing here with a take is say, I actually want to use this transition and I want to do it on mix 1, mix 2, mix 3. So that creates that sort of looping view of the guests coming in that we're doing here. I wait for that transition to complete, and then I go and set the preview, as I mentioned. This is making sure that everything is consistent with a take. And so I'm just doing this, and that's a single take for one channel. And for the take all, it's just sort of an amalgam. I'm coming in here and saying, do a transition to cube zoom for all the live mixes, and then wait for those to settle, and then go and update all of the previews in those live mixes to the corresponding inputs that we had in the dynamics. And so if like for slot 1, we use, dynamic input 1, 2, and 3, et cetera, as we go. So that gives us everything set up there. So the key here is that even though we are using scripting, these are basically shortcut equivalents. So if I switch back to what we have in vMix over here and go into settings, if I go into shortcuts, so go over here, you can see these are all just duplicates of everything we had here, for each one of the guests. Open, rem 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are my remote guests. And this S1 is slot 1, 2, and 3. So this is just duplicates. And so to do this, all I have are these little mini scripts that are essentially shortcut calls. So I could have done each of these as multiple individual shortcuts, but by doing it as a script start dynamic, this lets me just combine multiple shortcuts into a single button press. And that's really useful for these types of things where I want to take multiple actions in a single sort of to create a single transaction in state on the production. So this is a very simple way to do it. You don't really have to learn any complex scripting. There's no working with the vMix XML or any of that. This just combines multiple shortcut calls into single button presses to let you do these types of transactions. So one of the things that I think you'll notice with this is that you could scale this lots of different ways. So if you wanted to have panels, you could sit there and go, I can have panel 1 on, I can get everybody set and then bring panel 2 on as sort of a transition. But you could also do it transactionally. So if I just want to take individually and say, I want to just replace this one remote guest with this other remote guest, you can do that directly as well. And that's going to give you more control over everything that's going on screen. And it makes it much simpler to deal with your remote guests because you don't, like I said, you don't have to have sort of a 6-box shot all the time or be scrambling to try to create different combinations. This just sort of says you can have, 1 to 3 or 1 to 4 or 1 to 5, whatever you sort of want with this, and then just assign your guests accordingly. And, you can set up your Stream Deck or however you want different ways for that as well, or use multiple Stream Decks for doing assignments and, then doing, actions all these types of things can be set up differently, but all the core pieces are here, and it uses sort of very non-threatening scripting for those who, don't like to dive onto the code side. So that's everything here. Hopefully, this covers some stuff that everybody was interested in, and we are always looking at doing things that are real world applicable. So if you have other specific things you'd like us to cover, please let us know. But this was something that we got back from a few people that they'd like a very straightforward way to do this. So this is what we put together. But this really wraps up our show for this week. If you'd like to hang out for our post show, that would be great. If you can't, though, I want to thank you for joining us and let you know that we will have our next show in 2 weeks. I think that's April 25th. Which is a Friday, and we'll be covering something I think you'll be interested in. We have a new product that we're launching, and I'd like to give everybody a sneak peek of that in our next show. So that would be something that I'm excited to share with all of you. But if you're not going to join us for the post show, thank you very much. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Be safe, be well. If you are, see you in a few minutes. All right, welcome to our post show, everybody. Thank you all for joining us for the show. I really appreciate that. We are in this season. We have been focusing a lot more on sort of virtual events, webinars, things of that sort. We've had a few other topics that we've jumped into, but we're seeing that there's a lot of interest in that, and I think that's something that we can probably, get a lot of different scenarios that are broadly useful, but still sort of focus in more on there. So that's probably going to be thematically more where we'll be heading throughout this. But Michael is saying, a new product. The quick take is that we have a new version of our LiveToAirZ product that has just gotten official blessing from the folks at Zoom that will let you do some things with remote Zoom guests and integrate them as part of a production. So we'll be sharing more about that in 2 weeks with everybody, but that's a little teaser for that. And we're really excited because this is something we've been working on for quite a long time to get this sort of dialed in and to sort of take the feedback from the market for what actually needs to be in a product like this. So we're excited to share that with you on our next show. So as I said, as we've done a lot of this stuff, we're going to focus a lot more on these types of virtual event scenarios. But there's so much territory in this that I think for even if you're not doing those types of things specifically, we'll definitely be able to cover a lot of production concepts. So Otis, thank you for joining us. Always great to see you here. Thanks. So the other thing is, Spatial is saying, he's asking if I'm excited about DaVinci Resolve 2.0. Yeah, so there's a lot that Spatial is saying. I actually am very excited. We use Resolve here for everything we do for, review videos, or I think we just put out a new review video a couple of days ago. That's over in our video section, not the live section. Yeah, we use DaVinci Resolve for all of that. A lot of cool stuff in Resolve 20 that I am excited about. I would love to do more shows on the ATEM as well, by the way. Especially, I don't have one here. So it's, it is something that I think there is a lot of interest in, and it isn't always covered in a lot of detail. but definitely some cool stuff in the ATEM space for, especially for live events where people want to do sort of large screen displays or other things that will where timing will be more noticeable. So there's lag or latency. So anything that you do with that in a live venue, having a hardware switcher is really preferable to software switches. It's just they're lower latency. So yeah, and an HDMI SDI version would clearly be very attractive. But the other thing I've noticed with Blackmagic is they are really heavily in SMPTE 2110, which is sort of the IP standard that competes with NDI in terms of sort of general production IP connectivity. So I think that they're sort of figuring out where this market is going to play out. And, is it going to be HDMI on the low end and SMPTE 2110 at the high end? Where does SDI fit in going forward? Especially if people are doing, things that are more 4K focused. Where does that play out? So going to be interesting to see how all this plays. But Blackmagic is releasing some incredible stuff, and it is, in relative terms, really affordable. So excited about what they're doing. So Michael is saying he had a great advertising input setup where he could show the football field live and combine this with commercials from a video list. Worked in vMix 27 and not vMix 28. That's interesting. I'm not sure why it wouldn't work. I'd be happy to, we could talk to you sort of offline and see if we can see what was going on. But this could be definitely something interesting going on there that we could maybe do a show on and talk a little bit about some changes there. So yeah, if anybody else has, that would be cool to share that. And you can share that in Facebook if in our group there, and or in the comments here on if you're on YouTube. So either way, that would be great. And let's see if we can figure out if something's going on here. So I do not know of any 2110 NDI converters yet. So that's and Michael's asking that as the protocols are significantly different, and I'm not sure that would be easy to pack. And it's not so much the protocols. I mean, the 2110 is very high bandwidth, and NDI is low bandwidth. So you would need to do some type of significant encode, decode to make that work. And I'm not sure whether you could do that in sort of a small converter. There may be larger converters or rackier that could do that, but I'm not sure, our traditional like little square brick that we can stick on the back of something. It may be possible. I mean, I really haven't looked at it at a technical level, but it probably requires a little bit more than our traditional HDMI or SDI to NDI style converters, which the protocols are pretty closely aligned, and it's more reframing and repacketizing things. So yeah, I didn't get to NAB this year because, as I mentioned, we have a new product coming out, which has kept everybody busy here. But I don't know if any of you guys went, whether there was anything you saw that was really exciting or interesting to you. So Michael's asking if 2110 is more demanding on the network. Yes, it is. 2110, if I remember, I mean, each feed on 2110, I believe, is over a gigabit. So, and NDI sort of at its peak is like 350 megabits. So even with 4K on a standard network, 1 gig network connection, you could do 3 NDI 4K feeds, and that would work. You'd need to be sort of 2110 is sort of, you're already on a 10 gigabit network to make that work. And it's just it is a lot more demanding as a protocol. And I'm not pretending to be an expert in it though. So but everything we've looked at sort of says this is for a more professional installation setup where that extra bandwidth is important to you, and the resolution loss you get or the detail loss you get from compression in NDI is significant enough to make an impact because the work you're doing has that sort of critical visual nature. I don't think that for the way most people consume media today, that is going to become an issue. Uh, the reality is, yeah, there are some people that are watching programming that's coming in and they have very large screens, but those are typically coming across encoded platforms that are down-resing them and compressing them anyway. So even if the native source is high res, uh, the end delivery isn't. And I think that's one of the things that, as a reality against, the theoretical benefits of it, you're just going to sit there and go, consumers just aren't consuming on platforms that are able to have that level of clarity end to end. And so I'm not sure how that's going to play out, but 2110, I think, is not as well positioned as NDI, sort of going forward, at least for the bulk of productions that are going on. I think the sort of the general hearts and minds of production people are going to find more benefits in NDI than in 2110. But we'll see. I could certainly be surprised on that. So, as I mentioned, if you had anything that was interesting, pipe in, and I'd love to, anything from NDI that you thought was cool or innovative or different. Would definitely love to talk about that. The other thing I wanted to share is that for some reason, Facebook has made the decision that anything that we post live on Facebook is now going to go away within 30 days after posting, and that everything that's up there already will be going away. I forget exactly the date, but within the next couple of months, all of our prior content that are sitting up there as shows will be fading away. So, in a lot of ways, that's a shame because it means that we sort of lose that catalog on Facebook. But so far, YouTube has been very good about this. And the reality is, for us, most people are joining through YouTube. It just tends to have a, higher reliability, higher quality in what actually gets streamed out. So if you're going to be looking for the archives, YouTube is going to be your place to go. So Michael's saying about 8K, 4K and 8K cameras. Yeah. I mean, that pipeline is that is really it. So you're going through really high cameras for the acquisition, but then you're streaming, maxing out. Even though you can stream at 4K, the reality is almost nobody does. You're maxing out at sort of 1080, and then you're watching on a small phone. But I mean, it's funny because Blackmagic actually introduced a camera, and I think it had a 17K sensor, if I remember correctly. So, yeah, there's a lot going on the acquisition side that is really exciting. But the interesting piece for that, these things that you do as acquisition, or where I do that initial capture, they could have, some of it is sort of what they would call evergreen content that could have a very long shelf life. So having it in the highest quality original master gives you a lot of options downstream, even if you edit it. So like I could come back and say, let me capture something at, a 12K or 17K, size sensor. I can capture it in that, convert it down to something easier to edit it out and publish it, but then go back and at some future point, do read ads on that, repurpose that content. And when I have that very high resolution content now, I can go and start to pan around and do zoom ins and different type of moves, things that I wouldn't necessarily have been able to do if I had a lower res capture. And so I could do that in direct edits now, or I just have really high res source footage that I could leverage at different platforms in the future. So be interesting how that uptake happens in the market. A lot of people think that 4K is great. I do see some 8K stuff going on, uh, but that's just going to be interesting. So Jesse is sharing his sentiment there. So that's an interesting turn of phrase there. But yeah, that's uh, we've we've had issues, and that's been something that is a shame, because I think as a potential community building platform, they have a lot going for them. I just think they're sort of focusing in different directions now, and we'll see where Facebook ends up in a few years regarding the sort of the live stream community, and how people are sort of interacting and engaging on it. Maybe they'll come out with some stuff. Maybe they have some sort of plans they haven't fully rolled out that could make it very attractive. I mean, one of the things I mentioned before during the show was how engagement, in these types of productions with your community is really important. So maybe they have some stuff in the pipeline for more engagement that wouldn't translate well to the archive footage, but really is where they're focusing. Don't know. Would love to see. Would love to see where they play out with that. So, yeah. So Michael's saying, have I ever used something from a 1-year-old stream or show? The the quick answer is no, but I may not be your typical use case for this, because I'm not doing this as a sort of a professional career. I could definitely see people that are doing interview programs where, if you are streaming out lower res, but you can capture at higher res, that could give it longer shelf life. And there are lots of occasions where you could pick up clips from old interviews that are even decades old, that if that had been captured at higher resolution, that could be relevant in different types of contexts, where producing documentaries, you're producing more journalistic type pieces, where you're doing sort of investigative pieces, or uh, in-depth investigatory pieces, whether it's like sort of I'm exploring technology, or I'm exploring a story, or I'm doing interviews. So I could see that there are some situations where that old footage would be valuable. But for me personally, I mean, most of the stuff we do is more transactional, and the real benefit for the going back is that people want to look up how to do something that we covered, because most of our stuff is tutorial driven. So so yeah. So Michael is saying, yeah, there's in the past 8 years, there's only a few photos that he's used, and photos are one of those things where they they have always been really high res, and you can actually get some incredible things from even very old cameras, 50, 60, 70-year old photos that still have great detail in them. So definitely, it isn't that the medium is there, but to Michael's point, there aren't necessarily lots of occasions where you would go back. But if you are creating that type of content, I could see it. For me, 4K future proofs me for all that I actually need, I think. So all right. So let's see, what else is there. I think that's probably everything I wanted to cover. As I mentioned, if you have things that you would like to see us cover here going forward, definitely just share them in comments. We have a lot of feedback that we're already sort of putting into the pipeline for things that you've told us in the past and we're looking at. And we're excited because we have a lot of people that are talking to us about. I know there are some new things going on in new tech land with their TriCaster. So we've had people asking about that. DaVinci Resolve and everything we've mentioned here. Any asset preparation for different productions you're doing. Any repurposing post production. They've got some interesting stuff in DaVinci Resolve 20 for working with portrait-based footage, or for converting your footage into portrait-based delivery as well as landscape. So cool stuff there. So a lot of interesting things we think will be in store for the rest of this year. So, but why don't we call this a wrap for today? And I want to thank everybody for joining and for being around for the post show. Definitely appreciate this part of the program every week, or every show that we do. And I will see you all in 2 weeks. Until then, be safe, be well. Take care, everyone.